colonialism, and patriarchy. Today I'm gonna have Chadwick Tree on here, so invite him come on. Thank you for joining me on the live. Just burning some sage real quick. Um,
Hey,
hey,
I'm oriented. Good.
how's it going?
How you doing? That's
I'm
all.
good, thank you.
Trying to orient myself. Can I do it? That's the
You
question.
might want to flip your phone, I think.
All right. Well, that's gonna be complicated. Let's see how this goes. All right. Aye. All right.
There we go.
I'm gonna have to hold it. Let's see. That kind of sucks, but okay. Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you? I'm nice to officially meet you,
That's very
virtually.
yes.
Thank
I
you for joining me today. Again, I really appreciate it.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited. This will be my first time doing anything like this. So I definitely be easy on me. I don't know.
No, that's fine. Just treat it like we're having a FaceTime. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
We'll be good. So I just want to do a little prayer for some people out there. So I just want to send love to anybody out there that is suffering from mental health issues. I want to send love to anybody that's suffering from domestic violence. I want to send love to any of our ancestors or our loved ones that have passed on to the spirit realm. I want to send love to yourselves for being here today. And lastly, I want to send love to our precious Mother Earth for allowing us to all exist and just be here in this presence today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today at Burn the Wagon. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Thank you, Creator. So thank you today, Chadwick, for joining me. So just want to get started with just kind of where you're from, and then we'll get into the other questions I got going for you too.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Chadwick Tree. I was born and raised in the New York area, in New York City, and New York State. But my family are all from Boriken, which is current day Puerto Rico, and are of various descent. But my tribes are Caguana, Taino, Boric, from like the Caguas area, and then also Yabacoa, my grandma's side. And my father I was raised with is Jewish. And also, we'll get into it a little bit, but I probably won't get into it too much because I know what a hot topic that is. But Jewish people are also Indigenous, and and also my ancestry mostly is on my grandfather's side is Basque, and we're Yuskalandak, Ueskalandak, and from the house of Itaveria. So mostly Nafuera or like Navare area. So anyway, three tribes, yeah.
Okay, so I was just doing some research on the Basque people. So like, let's switch the questions up. First, I was going to talk about your art, but like, let's talk about those tribes first, because I was just doing research, and the Basque people, they have the longest language in Europe, over there in Europe, correct?
Yeah, so basically my understanding, I'm not an expert by any means.
Yeah. I literally just watched the videos on YouTube. And I'm like, oh, I know everything. No, I'm just kidding.
My understanding on the history is that they have recorded a document from 1500 and then another writing from 1,000 years ago, which is a long time, I think, for any sort of writing.
Yeah.
And which I think was paired with like Iberian, which is technically a language. That was around at that time, which is no longer really around. But as far as the history of the Basque people, they have been around. They are basically genetically Neolithic farmers who mixed with the hunter-gatherers of the time, and their language is a language isolate, so it had never really been changed or influenced too much by other languages because they were, at least in part, protected by living in a cluster of the Pyrenees Mountains, so that the French peoples and the Spanish peoples never got to completely absorb them in any way, and they are the oldest living peoples of Europe. Yeah,
Because it's like right in the middle of Spain and France, correct?
yeah. So my family's house is, and that's how they kind of regard it now. I think a lot of what we have now in Basque culture is medieval, but obviously it's such a longer history than that. But things that are more or less relevant today in the new age are from that time, so they call it a house. and my house is from the Spanish side
Oh, okay.
of the autonomous region of Basque Country.
Have you ever been over there?
No, so I've never been over there, and that's the one part of my history. So like, my family are from Boriken,
Uh-huh.
from Puerto Rico, and like, I always had like a lot of very vague stories from my grandfather, who unfortunately is passed now because of COVID last year.
I'm
Um,
sorry to hear that.
no, thank you. And basically, the stories were super vague, so we didn't actually know what we were. But my grandfather would always say that he would see them wearing these red sashes or red and green, and he thought they were Italian. And he didn't even know really anything. And so, and he was a fisherman. And I think like in his heart of hearts, he was really just about being a fisherman above anything else. So it really didn't matter what he was. So, you know, I wasn't in a situation where he was passing me anything down. He was like, if you want to talk fish, we could talk fish, but if you want to, nothing else matters to me. And I love him for that. That's kind of somehow like gonna tie into my story a little bit too. Even though that isn't the case, I am that personality type where I think like I'm all these things, and this culture is great, and I love culture, but it's not something that in a health, and when I'm healthy and healthily living, is something that has to be in my every single moment and every day and every expression, you know. But either way, so yeah, I never been there, and I didn't really know much about it until I did my family tree, in which I found that every single person for generations, from his side of the family are from the same exact town. I have like a bunch of records via baptism, because eventually this culture obviously did become Christianized, like a lot of cultures, you know, and all these different things. So I got to really dive in and realize some things about my family via that information. But as far as growing up, I always knew that I grew up with Auntie from the Toscarara, I know I'm going to pronounce that wrong, Indians from North Carolina. And she would always tell me that like you're Indigenous and don't forget it, from like the youngest age. And I think it like helped me a lot to keep that in mind throughout all the ups and downs and problems that come with like claiming your Indigenous roots in America, and you know, in this country where it's like, no, please assimilate and don't be anything but what we, the majority, maybe classify you as, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're kind of just like school and everything kind of like just grooms you for the workforce to be just a working human, you know. So like you're saying, in America, you're just groomed to be just like
Yeah.
a working cog in the machine.
Yeah, and kind of like forget everything else, because all that matters is your productivity. So
Yeah,
all the other,
exactly.
you being silly. I remember even like, you know, love my family to death, but I think of some key members of my family, they were more assimilated than others, you know, and so it was hard to have those discussions with them as a young man, because they didn't really want to hear that I was considering myself Indigenous, you know, because they nationalized. So even if they either nationalized with the concept of the Spanish colony of Puerto Rico, or they nationalized with being American and nothing else, because that's what made them feel safe. But as a queer man, I never felt. I mean, first of all, I'm also like a giant. Like I'm like 6'6", and I used to be like 150 pounds bigger than I am now. I'm basically like a force of a human, like a big wall. And like I feel no need to conform, or I don't really have an interest to really listen to anyone else. I just want to know what's right for me. I know that I'm not a bad person, so even in me being a little rebellious, quote unquote, to the norms of the way things are, I'm not trying to hurt anyone, you know. So I know that
Yeah.
I'll make mistakes, but anyway, so yeah, I had a lot of like experience where the only thing that like tied me to knowing that I was Indigenous was that my Indigenous auntie, that like I've been with her family, I went to powwows, I experienced the community. She was also you know, genetically African, you know, and had been part of that Southern story of slavery and everything like that in her ancestry, with the Indigenous slavery as well. So I feel like I understood what it meant to be mixed Indigenous, or I knew what it meant to be more than one thing. So when people were to tell me what I was a very quiet person as a kid, but in my mind I was like, you know what the hell you're talking about. I know what I know what I feel. I know what I'm talking about. I know my history. So, you know, good, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I can 100% connect to that because I was adopted for the first day I was born. And like, so I know my biological mom, but I don't know my biological father.
Mm-hmm.
But so she's white, so I'm half white.
Mm-hmm.
So like I always grew up knowing that, but like so I was raised on the Pomo reservation. So I was always felt at home. I never felt like I always claimed to be Pomo. So and I always felt like that.
Yeah.
So like, I did have a little confusion growing up as a teenager, but like eventually it all fused together and started coming together. It's like I identify, and now I'm really taking it on. It's like I really identify as Indigenous.
Yeah, and you know that's a huge part of my understanding and education, even from a childhood. You know, was that it being Indigenous. You know, race was only really invented 500 years ago when colonizers had to like say what category you were as a slave or a worker or a person in society. And so before that, I mean, Indigenous people had of all types of throughout history had numerous types of people coming in and out of their communities and being adopted into them. And so it's really about, in some circumstances, you know, like for example, when I did find out about my Basque heritage, I wanted to like understand there's a distance, you know, I didn't grow up with the Basque heritage. I didn't want to be all about it, you know, but me looking into it and understanding what classifies someone who's Uescalandac or Basque, they basically I qualify or whatever. But the truth is that I think I won't feel that way until I go there, until I learn the language fully, you know. But either way, I'm really proud of that heritage. But either way, I think like it's about being adopted into things. Even so, like my also experience is that my father is Jewish, but is also technically an adopted father, even though I 100% just see him as my father, and frankly didn't even know any different for a long time when I was really young. I didn't really have the background too well, and I also didn't have an experience with another father, so it really didn't make a difference to me. And also, to be honest, I just was raised so Jewish that there's like no option for me except to be Jewish. Like it was had like the most like New York Jewish experience on the planet. So I think that it is what it is, you know, and I love my people, you know, but I think that that is not who I am genetically on my father's side, but that doesn't mean anything. It's my dad, the Jewish people are my people, my family are my family, you know.
And like you said in the beginning, they're indigenous to a certain part of the world as well, and they went through a almost genocide just like the indigenous people here in America too, you know. So it's we can connect on a lot of ways in that I think as well, you know.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. My experience in this country, I think I grew up always with a bigger mind. I always thought globally, you know, in a way. I always thought, I never thought of things in this like United States perspective. So I always thought of Indigenous people of all types, you know, in my mind, in my mind's eye, visualizing what Indigenous people are and what they meant. And I think like it's a very interesting experience, especially now on Instagram, to be honest. I feel like there's like a very strong lack of any other type of representation except the more obvious North American representation, or maybe to some degree now the South American representation on a visual level, you know. But I think that, you know, I could see why, you know, there would be some controversy on the Jewish thing because it's just such an old culture, and there's just so many things that went on. And the particular story of genocide, it kept repeating itself in different regions, right? Because like my family actually moved to Poland so many years ago that you probably wouldn't know when that happened. And then there were Polish Jews, just like there are all these different types of Jews that left, Jerusalem. And they ended up all these different places, but they always maintained their indigeneity to these traits and these characteristics that they'd have to fight throughout wherever they moved. I mean, to this day, Jews are being prosecuted in the same, or like killed in the same way that Indigenous people in this country are Indigenous to this country. So, and also like the Basque people, Franco dictatorship in Spain really made it so that the Basque people couldn't speak their language for many years, to the point where it was becoming a dead language. And so there was intervention that happened, and there was very many dialects and very many differences in the language depending on where you were, and they kind of made a unified version. And then I guess once the dictatorship was over, they became an autonomous region, and then people could speak the language again. And now it's like 6 out of 10 people in the Basque country, I think, speak Euskera. And like I think that these people are not what you think of when you think of an Indigenous person, I think, in this country. But it's really funny because to me, that's always been part of my thought process. It's like I can think of so many different people, you know, around Europe and Africa and the world that are Indigenous to where they're from. And it kind of actually plays into a bigger story of decolonization, I think, and for everyone, or for many people, you know. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I also want to talk about the Teyano people as well, because they were the first people to get the contact from the Spanish. Is correct? Like yeah, in
So,
that in the Puerto Rican. You go ahead and explain it.
no, it's good. So yeah, the Greater Antilles is a bunch of the northern islands in the Caribbean, and also I think technically it's part of Florida, but basically they were the first ones to be contacted by Columbus, and therefore kind of the first ones to be technically colonized, you know, and also just like completely a huge population obliteration, you know. Most of the people survived by kind of unfortunately working with the Spanish to some extent, or fleeing to the mountains where they could hide as best they could. And then and that's really the only reason why I probably exist, and Indigenous people like me exist, because there were some survivors, you know, who then had to become like a mixed culture, and they had to become you know, they mixed with Europeans later on, but they mixed with other Indigenous people were in the Caribbean, including from Mexico, like what current day Mexico, and there were different South American tribes there, and there was also African people that became free through circumstances that were able to kind of keep Taino people alive, you know, in a lot of ways. So, so as far as what I know about them is that we really went to a level of language death, you know. We really only had a few outliers, which were the Kalinago people, who are, I believe, are in the Lower Antilles, who are in relation to some degree historically with the Taino people, but they had, in this very positive way, they were able to like keep some. They speak a Arawakan language, which is where the Taino people originated from, indigenous cultures of South America, and basically they were able to you know, reconstruct the language today. And I think that as we speak, probably the strongest efforts to reconstruct our language are occurring. Yeah.
Oh, that's another question I was going to ask. Is it like now currently are they speaking Spanish?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that there are some individuals who are just speaking Taino, you know, which is depends on where you're from. Like it's basically island Arawak, or maybe some version of Kalinongo or something. It's definitely not what it was, you know, but it's the best we can do with what we have. And so yeah, they're reconstructing it. But there's some people who probably definitely, I think there's a few people that I could think of that actually speak it on a daily basis, and maybe primarily, especially with their families, and depending on where they live. But I think that, of course, on the island, everyone is speaking Spanish. And, you know, the truth is that without even knowing it, there's a lot of words that are Taino that have existed this whole time. and are words that people use in on the islands every day probably, or maybe every week depending on their lifestyle choices. But like barbacoa, you know,
Ah,
or canoe is kanoa, hammock is hamaka, and there's a lot of words. I can't remember them all, but there's definitely a lot of words that come from the Taino language that just happen to last, you know. So we're lucky to have probably like, I'm only guessing based off of my experience. I'm sure there's plenty more, but maybe like 40, 50 words that have just existed this whole time, you know.
do you speak Spanish at all?
No, I do not speak Spanish at all. Yeah, and you know it's funny because I think like the majority of my family does, but I never felt the need to. And it's funny because when I look at, I did like extensive work on my family tree because I was always curious. My family just seemed different to me, you know, on the island, to a lot of the people that were there and a lot of my friends there. There was just something about them, and that made me very like puzzled and interested. And so I did like very deep family work, and not many of them would have spoken Spanish. They, you know, except for the ones that obviously are in a Spanish colony who are assimilated to the point of speaking Spanish. But so I think if the story looked a little different when I did the research, I might have been like, well, I guess I should learn. But now I don't feel that way whatsoever.
No, I actually saw a video the other day that like a guy, it was like a guy just like dancing. And it was it's okay if you don't speak Spanish because your ancestors didn't either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I that's it's okay that you don't speak. I like to learn Spanish because I work in kitchens.
Yeah.
Like it's like a thing that it's an essential thing to have, is like to be able to bilingual, you know.
It's so widely spoken, you know, so it totally makes sense. You know, to be honest, another thing I wanted to talk about today was that I feel like I went through an experience relatively young and luckily guided in somewhat by the things I've learned from Indigenous people and other tribes. Like I said, my auntie and stuff, and her father and family members, who had kind of like, at least in my childhood, lived pretty old school. So I got to see like some touches of how they probably lived in many earlier years on their ancestors. But I lost my point. I was going to say, oh yeah. So what happened was I was guided by those kind of things, like my warming experiences that I felt. But I think during COVID, when everyone was stuck on these screens, right? I felt that there was something happening that actually kind of like shook me and made me actually want to step away from growing in my own path via communicating with others who are Indigenous. And that something that like I wanted to speak on today because I feel like, you know, I think there is this generational trauma. There is this like pain that's connected to the idea that you could have had all your culture if love was the only thing that existed and people didn't kill one another. But historically, that's all we really know, is that the world has just, everyone's just killing each other for the freaking heck of it. And it's crazy, it is. But I saw a lot of people, and I don't name anyone, but like people in my own tribal communities. I had been in touch with them physically by right before COVID, going to powwows, and then also just like Facebook groups and all this stuff. And a lot of our tribes have like different Instagram pages and stuff like that. And you know, communing with elders, I never felt this issue, but when I was actually looking at comments and talking to people, I feel like there was just a level of hate for anyone who either wanted to identify with any other aspect of themselves. And in some cases, it was the African aspects, the Spanish aspects, or whatever the case may be. And I just felt like it's totally missing the freaking point of this, you know? It's like, of course you're going to have pain, but I think like all Indigenous people need to know, you must not use that pain to hurt others. You know, that's not going to help us. That's not going to move this forward. That's not going to move this experience in a loving, beautiful rebirth way that it needs to happen, you know? And I think I just saw so much of it, you know? And I think that like another thing that I think is really interesting experience is that you never know who you're excluding by just understanding yourself as a Taino person today, specifically, because I don't mean to speak for anyone else except myself, even in its experience, but like by kind of disregarding who your other ancestors could have been. You know, for example, my Basque ancestors didn't really come until it was very late. Slavery was over. I mean, of course, slavery as we know it is not really ever over in some contexts, but like it was on a paperwork level over when they got here. It was hundreds of years from the original colonizers who would have either been Basque or Spanish or whatever. And either way, I'm not the kind of person to blame my ancestors of any kind today. It doesn't make any sense to me, you know. People make horrible mistakes. People make horrible decisions. I am not the sum of maybe any ancestor doing anything bad, you know, because there's a billion things humans can do bad, you know, don't have to do anything with indigeneity. And that doesn't fall upon me at this age. So in my opinion, I think that, and that is all this is that there was just a lot of hatred towards anyone who felt any other sort of way within the Indigenous community, and it really didn't make any sense to me. So just like, cut that out, people.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of hate within our own communities, for sure, because I grew up on the res, and like when I started this this whole podcast thing, because I'm not originally, like I said, I'm adopted, so I'm not technically from the tribe. And I posted the video, and one woman got super angry. She thought I was looking to financially gain from this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so she went on this big rant, telling me that I shouldn't be the one doing this. I should stop, you know, essentially. But I didn't let that, you know, once I went to go respond to her, there was like 45 comments, like going back at her, telling her just like, yo, just like, why are you being so hateful? Just like allow him to identify with his like indigenous side, you know?
Yeah.
So I agree with that. Like, you know, there is a lot of hate within our own communities. And there is a lot of hate. I was talking to somebody the other day towards a lot of African-American people as well. And It's crazy because coming from the reservation, we want to be ghetto. We want to be hip hop. We want to be the African community. We want to be everything that they are.
Yeah.
But like we hate on them so much. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, none of it makes any sense. And also, like, as an example, while my partner doesn't actually identify as Indigenous via his Sami heritage in Norway, I've like learned a lot about it based off the fact that he, you know, recognizes his distance, but recognizes that that's where his families originate from. He has that information, but basically he does not speak the language, and his recent ancestors haven't, so that doesn't allow him to be considered Sami by the tribes themselves. You know, they have a specific. Every tribe seems to have a very specific understanding of what it means to be what they are. You know, and so, but for example, one of the most famous Sami yokers, which is like the singing they do, is from Colombia. He actually was adopted by a Sami family, and he's considered one of them, like Sami as heck, like just like the most Sami person you could imagine. And there is some like online nonsense being said, and I'm like, if you were a person who understood what being Indigenous was and what it meant to be claimed by Indigenous tribe, regardless of who you are, then you wouldn't be saying any of this nonsense, you know? So it's like not even worth, like literally anyone who's commenting that's gonna say anything crazy to me, I'm just not gonna answer it because I don't have the time to waste for that kind of, those kind of comments and those kind of feelings, you know? Like I understand the pain and all these emotions that is tied to all this, but if it's hurtful to anyone else, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this since, and actually, you like you said earlier, like if someone's adopted into a situation and they live the lifestyle that tribe has you know is about and lives of the ingenuity of that tribe, I believe that person is from that tribe, you know, or if they identify with that family or with those people, then as long as they live those people with those teachings of those people, I believe that they can identify that as those people, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's about like, it is really about connecting with different members of the tribe, or with the land itself and different aspects of things. And I do believe in trying to understand where that tribe's coming from and their perspective prior to maybe making any claims like that. You know what I mean? Like for me, I also was kind of just like, I took a long time to figure things out. Like the Taino thing was just like inherent for me. I didn't feel like it was a complication whatsoever. But definitely with Esquilandoc and like being even Jewish, I felt so Jewish. But for a while, I think I remember like my sibling was giving me a hard time because he's like, "You're not Jewish," blah, 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 just like kids do, and it really like hurt me. And I had to think, I'm like, well, am I not partaking in all these customs? Like there's just so much that goes into being Jewish. Like we it's so involved, and on every holiday I'm super involved. I mean, I'm a shy person, but I would read during Passover. I would do all the things that we do, and so yeah, everyone has their own journey, and it's good to like know where the tribes themselves are coming from and the way they perceive it. But outside of that, yeah, nothing else matters for sure.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking about this since you said it. Being 6'6", how many times have you heard, "Oh, you probably play basketball"? How many times have you heard that shit in your life?
No, I know, yeah. And the funny thing is, it's like I couldn't dislike group sports more. Like I probably am like the biggest hater on group sports. Like I never want to group up with anyone and do anything. That doesn't sound like a good time to me. So I'm like, I remember I was actually bribed in high school a bunch by I guess the coaches and stuff to start. And I'm like, just because I'm a giant doesn't mean I can jump, doesn't mean I can shoot. I don't know like what you're expecting of me, but I'm literally I'm at the time I was like anti-physical. Like I literally went on hikes, and that's actually kind of still my level of physicality. So they just assumed because I was so tall that I'd be basketball whiz or something for sure.
And that's kind of that I don't know, that American life. You're supposed to go to high school, play basketball, or play football, be a part of the high school football team, be a prom person. It's like fuck all that shit.
Yeah, no, I know. It was a really interesting experience too. And I think like also the thing that I noticed in high school was that no one knew how to see me. And I think that it's because some people would know that I'm from a very, very big, loudmouth Jewish family. So like if they knew my other siblings or something like that, they would know we were Jewish, or they would see my, maybe my skin tone, and they would assume I was Latin of some sort. And then they didn't know how to react if I represented myself as Indigenous, whatever it was. It was just such a funny experience because as a queer person too, it's just like, it was such an awkward experience to be in high school. Like, I'm not a sports player, but I'm a giant, I'm not into really, I wasn't really into much. I was just like, I was really an art, like that artist that just sat down and painted and drew. That's all I did really. And
okay, that actually leads me right into the next question. So you said did you start, you're doing art in high school?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure it was elementary school, but I don't really remember any details. When that question was sent to me, I was like, I have never, ever, ever thought about when I started drawing or painting. I am certain that I had drawn a little bit or painted a little bit, probably prior to being 10 or something. Obviously, kids do that, but like more, detailed stuff probably before being 10. So I can't remember, but I think I do remember some key things, which were that I loved anime growing up. And so that's what got me into art. I was already in the arts. I was really into classical music and opera. So I was a singer for years prior to really drawing, And so I was studying very rigorously music. And then I started getting to anime. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I want to be a manga artist or like, draw for a living. And so I got into that, and then I kind of just like grew in school. And then like I know I had like a really dark patch of time where like my family's getting divorced and everyone's crazy emotional and everything's crazy, and I just was like drawing really dark stuff, and everyone's like, you need help and stuff like that. I was like, this is how I'm expressing myself right now, And to be honest, like my family are a bunch of like horror movie lovers. I think it was mostly people outside of that bubble that were just kind of like, you're sick, what's wrong with you? And I'm just like, I'm feeling some stuff and this is how I'm doing it. And then as far as tattooing, which I know is another part of the question, was I got into tattooing because I actually I'm not gonna get into it too much because I'm actually not in great contact with this person anymore, but I met my biological father, and he's a tattooer, and I got involved with my cousin who owns a tattoo shop, and that's how I began to tattoo. And to be honest, at the time, I remember in my apprenticeship, people thought I'd be like an anime tattooer. Everyone's like, oh, that's what you want to do, because I had been continuing the love for anime through art for many years at that point. And then I remember as soon as I started doing it, I was like, I definitely don't want to do this in tattooing. Like, I don't want to. So I didn't like copying things. I felt like it was just a really weird custom that felt very much the machismo man version of what tattooing is. And so I was like, as soon as I understood what traditional tattooing was, or what I understood where my family might have been coming at that time with tattooing, and maybe some expectations on myself, I was like, I got to destroy all their expectations. Like, I'm just going to I literally just I remember it was circumstantial. My cousin had left the shop, and he was because he's in the Marines as well. And so he left, deployed, I guess you call it. And he was like my only thing keeping me at our family shop, you know. He's a good person, and we connect really well. So when he left, I was like, I just left and started traveling to different shops, and I opened up a little studio in New York City for a while on my own, and I just found out what tattooing meant to me. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I really like the line work that you do and the dark colors. I really like that. Like, I posted it was a whale one, I think, when I was previewing, talking about us going live. Yeah, I really like that line work that you do.
Yeah. So yeah.
How long?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, like, I think a lot of that comes from the idea that I still respect traditional tattooing, you know, of all types, even ancient tattooing and indigenous tattooing. But I think, so I like the boldness, but I definitely think that things have been shifting a lot for me. So I'm still always going to keep my line work, but I think I just am trying different things now.
Wow. And you said you sang for a while. I was actually talking to my coworker the other day about, he was in choir. What kind of singing did you do?
So, I mean, of course, I was in like a billion choirs. My school was like, I think it was an aspiring art, performing arts school. Like, it was basically a performing arts school. It was also as big as like a small campus, I feel like. So it was like, we had our own wing and part of a school that was always like the theater and theater kids and the arts kids and everything like that. And basically, it was mostly just classical arias and opera. Really, that's where I was going at that point, you know. Since then, I had sung with some like more like indie bands as an adult, and I also write my own music now. But I don't really have the time for music, so I don't get to enjoy it like I did. Yeah.
Honestly, like, growing up, I wish it was more encouraged in my community to do things like that. Especially, I always wanted to do things like theater, because it was, you have to be so masculine growing up on the res that, like, if you do something like do the theater, that's a feminine thing to do.
Yeah.
So you would get made fun of. And I always, like, I know I can still go back and do those things at a junior college and stuff now, but like, I just wish, like, growing up, if I would have done it, it would have like helped me a little bit more, be a little bit more outgoing, or would have like helped with like a little bit more stage fright, and talking to people would have been easier.
Yeah. I'm actually like, as a person, like, severely to myself. And also I was like really nonverbal as a kid. Like, most of the comments my family made to me were like, I'd be in the car and it would be crickets. And my dad will be like, Chad's so loud, you know, shut up, Chad. And I hadn't said a word for like 3 hours or on a road trip or something. And so I had really not talked much. And then I think getting into theater got me into talking, and to, you know, right now I'm surprised that I'm talking as much, because I am really, it's probably the most words anyone's heard from me. But I just feel like, yeah, I think theater really does help a lot, and that probably would have been the case for you. And I think that like it is never too late. There's definitely like adult theater companies and stuff like that that might be fun, like just to, if you have the time, obviously. But now with the adult life, you know.
Yeah, I got to work those fucking 40 hours a week, man.
Yeah, I know.
And we got theater head level, yes. When it comes- So yeah, I kind of want to ask the next question because I think we only got about like 15 minutes left. What does land back or decolonize mean to you?
Okay, so I think I'll start with decolonize.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that decolonize has this like very wide reach, in my opinion, and it's like this understanding that is really beyond what people might think it is, like in its immediate wording or, you know, verbiage or whatever. So like I think that decolonizing means to really break down every single thing that you've learned in this country and many others about what it is to be alive and what it is to exist in this structure and any structure, and to like, I think it's a level of like, I always wonder, could some of my family members who don't even think about this kind of stuff or don't really want to get too involved in this, because, you know, like, again, we have to work all those hours to make a living, and like life is difficult, and you just want to sit down and watch Netflix or whatever when you're off. So for some people, my family, and some people in general, you know, and I think I totally respect that and understand that. And I think like I know that my generation comes from privilege to even talk about these things, you know. Other people just really needed to survive, and at least we could like get a little bit more space to enjoy ourselves or think about these questions. But anyway, I always wonder if all people will decolonize, you know, like, will they be humble enough to like take all the things they've learned about this country and maybe see it from a pure perspective, and see if that will will like create anything more beautiful and holistic for people of all types, but also Indigenous people of this country and others. So I think it's just anything that had to do with colonization, which is basically everything, unfortunately, that the average person would be involved in if they're not Indigenous or involved in anything involving Indigenous communities. If they could just like really just be humble and be like, I know nothing, and then like learn from that point on, you know. And then also I think that it really applies to every single person, of course, but I think within culture, I think it applies to everyone too, you know. I think that I find assimilation to this country the saddest thing I've ever seen, because people of all types, and this literally is all types of people, have lost their cultures. They've lost their love. It's become America, you know, I hate that, but America over all things. And so basically they have lost sight of what it meant to even be their ancestors, sometimes not even that far back at all. And that respect, that understanding of the past and our cultures and our traditions is really the only thing that could move us forward in a way that's not gonna, like, we're not gonna completely explode the planet and be extinct, you know. So I think decolonization is like literally the cure for our demise. And so that's like an easy way to put it.
Yeah. Like you said, that's like a huge it's a huge question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, a big thing for me is like I said, like on growing up on the res, a toxic masculinity was a huge thing that was embedded into my brain, and I'm been doing like this work of like trying to heal and like reconnect to like, or just like get that toxic masculinity out of here.
Yeah.
For the last 2 years, and I'm just like learning a lot of things that like I didn't realize were like that I needed to change. And like you said, it's just been embedded into our way of living in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and those things have a hold on you, you know. I was thinking about it before we got live. I was like, wow, to think about the fact that something that happened 500, 600 years ago or so has such an influence today, you know. And for people who don't think about the fact that everything we do now has this another 500 years of significance or something, you know, all these generations of people ahead of us that are going to be affected by what we're doing right now, and like the work that you're doing right now for your family's, future, so that's not passed on. That's a whole generational trauma and everything. But I think that really all does have to do with decolonization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the land back, I think I'm actually I'm a Gemini, so I'm like extreme on both ends, right? So I'm like literally land back. Like we don't need to like discuss that. Like literally just give the land back. And like honestly, in my opinion, if that's not done on a physical level, in my opinion, again, then this country, let's say, for example, because I'm not like as versed as to exactly what's happening in every country, but in this country, I understand that even things that are indigenous land that are that they have the rights to at this time are being questioned and taken away as we speak, on things that you wouldn't imagine happening in the name of mining or oil rigs, obviously, and all that stuff. And I think that then when is that going to stop if they don't get the land back at this point? Then all the indigenous land is going to get smaller. The stewardship of the land is going to go away because it's not physically possible at some point. And then literally our land is just going to be a bunch of oil pipelines, and spills and death because of it in our ecosystem. That's my dog. I didn't realize he was right there. He's just like, what's up? But yeah, I think that so land back is like pretty literal to me. Like I think as a kid, I called myself an anarchist, which is also a weird term because I feel like I think it's honestly a colonial term in my mind. Like I just think like I heard that somewhere, I understood what it was to some degree, and I was like, destroy everything. I don't believe in anything. Like, and I truly don't. Like I think like my personality is such a whimsical character in my mind, or like I live in this fantasy world at times because I'm like, what is this? Like, what is happening here? Why do people tell me that you have to pay tax on this and this and this and this, and you have to do this and this and this, and you have to, all this nonsense? Like, I literally just want to like build my own little cabin and be somewhere that you have no connection to, and just be like, screw off, like I'm not interested in any rules, basically. So I think that, like, yeah.
I was actually watching a doc on the anchor house out in Sausalito today.
So what is the anchor house?
Anchor outs or something like that. They have their boats out in the bay of Sausalito, and they're technically only allowed 72 hours to anchor there, but they move their boats every couple hours, so, and then the boatmasters still mess with them, so like that's what that made me think of like living off grid and not having to pay taxes. Then they were talking, they don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to pay rent, their boats just right there in the water,
But either way, I mean, we shouldn't have to go to all those extents. I think that not only would like destroying all the systems, maybe, hopefully, I'm not an expert again, create a situation in which we'd all help out, on a physical level. And that would be part of our weekly existence to work within our communities to build this or that, or to, source this or that. And that would bring all of us together and probably make us feel a lot more connected than sitting here and paying this horrible corporation of a country to further destroy our lands and destroy our freedoms.
100%. I super appreciate you joining me today, and I don't want to get cut off because we only have an hour.
No
and I'm just about, because like that was a perfect end right there, and that was amazing. I super appreciate you coming on, and you're only 2 hours away from me, so hopefully whenever I'm in San Francisco, I'll tap in with you, and hopefully maybe one day get tattooed by you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, it'd be nice to see you. So thank you so much. And I'll see you later.
Thank you for tapping in from the Cherokee Reservation. Thank you for everybody that's tapping in too. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
Ciao.
Yahui, thank you to everyone that has joined me today on the live. Again, if anybody wants to join me on one of these, definitely tap in and give me a message and we'll talk about it. Do a date. Please share, like, and comment on YouTube, on Instagram as well. Yahui, thank you very much for joining me, and have a good day. Peace and love.